The haze of an early September morning clung to the valley, catching on the gilded tops of maples and stone river fences. The air was cool and clean, smelling of ripe apples, decaying leaves, and smoke from the chimney of the low, wild limestone house. Elijah Fisher stood on the threshold, leaning against the doorframe, and looked at his land. The land his grandfather, Johann Fisher, who had come from Pennsylvania, had cleared with his own hands, uprooting oaks and beeches to plant the first apple trees. He was 45, but in these morning hours, when his back ached from yesterday's labor and an unspoken anxiety clouded his eyes, he felt all of 60. His face, weathered and high cheekboned, was etched with wrinkles like a map of his life, deep grooves around his mouth from a frequent smile that was becoming rarer, and a vertical furrow between his brows from constant tension. He ran a hand with rough, calloused fingers through his short-cropped beard, already touched with gray, and sighed. "Father, breakfast is ready." Elijah turned. In the doorway stood his wife, Sarah. She was 40, but in her calm, gray eyes, in the soft features of her face, and in the quiet strength that emanated from her entire, short, sturdy figure, there was an ageless wisdom. Her hair, the color of ripe wheat, was tucked under a white cap, and her dark blue dress and apron were impeccably clean, despite the early hour. "Thank you, Mother," Elijah nodded. He always called her that, especially in front of the children. It was a sign of respect, an acknowledgement of her role. He entered the house. The large room, which served as kitchen, dining room, and living room, was filled with warmth and aromas. Logs crackled in the huge fireplace, an iron pot of oatmeal hanging over the fire. The oak table, made by Elijah's hands, was already set with a coarse linen tablecloth. On it stood clay bowls, mugs, and a pitcher of milk. Their children sat at the table. The eldest, Isaac, 19 years old, was the spitting image of his father in his youth, the same dark hair, stubborn chin, and brown eyes burning with an inner fire. He was saying something quietly to his younger brother, 12-year-old Aaron, who listened open-mouthed, forgetting his food. 15-year-old Rebecca, delicate and fair-haired like her mother, was helping set out bowls of honey and fresh bread. Next to her, 8-year-old Hannah, the youngest, fidgeted, her blonde curls escaping from under her cap. "Father!" they greeted in unison as Elijah took his place at the head of the table. Everyone fell silent, bowing their heads. Elijah prayed aloud, simply and sincerely, thanking the Lord for shelter, food, and for being altogether safe. He asked for nothing but the strength to follow his will. This was their rule. One could ask for daily bread, for forgiveness, and for guidance. Everything else was at his discretion. Breakfast passed in silence, broken only by the clinking of spoons and the crackling of the fire. But the silence was deceptive. Elijah felt the tension hanging in the air like pre-storm humidity. It came from Isaac. His son avoided his gaze, his fingers drumming nervously on the table. "Isaac," Elijah finally said, putting down his spoon, "you have something to say." It was not a question, but a statement. Isaac sighed and looked up. His eyes held that same fire that so frightened Elijah. "Mr. Jenkins from town was here yesterday, when you were in the orchard. He said Governor Letcher has called for the Virginia militia to be raised. The state must defend itself from invasion from the north. They're recruiting volunteers." The word invasion hung in the air, heavy and poisonous. Elijah felt his heart constrict. War. This war, talked about for years, had finally come to their quiet Shenandoah Valley. It had come not with the roar of cannons, but with the quiet words of a neighbor. "And what did Mr. Jenkins say?" Elijah asked, trying to keep his voice even. "He said every man able to hold a rifle must do his duty for Virginia, that we must repel the Yankees who want to destroy our way of life." Isaac's voice rang with excitement. "He said I'm a stout fellow and that my place is with the Shenandoah Cavalry." "Your duty, my son," Elijah said quietly but firmly, "is to the Lord. And the Lord says, 'Thou shalt not kill.'" "But they will come here, Father!" Isaac exclaimed, jumping up. "They will burn our homes, take our livestock. They say we are unrighteous because some have slaves, but we don't. We never have. We work ourselves. Exactly, Elijah nodded. We work ourselves, and we will not raise a hand against our brother. Not the one in blue, nor the one in gray. They are all God's children. But Mr. Jenkins says it's a war for our rights, for our land. Mr. Jenkins is a man of this world, Sarah said, and her quiet voice sounded like a rebuke. But we are not of this world, Isaac. We are Baptists. Our kingdom is not of this world. Our faith teaches us humility and peace. But what will happen to our faith if soldiers come and burn our church? Isaac persisted, his face flushed. Shouldn't we defend what we have? What we have, my son, said Elijah, is faith, and it cannot be burned. It can only be renounced, or preserved. We chose our path long ago, the path of nonviolence, the path Christ showed us. It is not an easy path, but it is our path. Isaac looked at his father, a storm raging in his eyes. Pride, youthful fervor, the desire to defend his home clashed with the teachings drilled into him for years. He swallowed and turned away sharply. "I'll go feed the horses," he muttered, and left the house, slamming the door loudly. The silence that followed his departure was even heavier. Little Hannah looked at her father with big, frightened eyes. "Father, will Isaac go to war?" she whispered. Elijah called her over, sat her on his knees, and hugged her. "No, my child, he will not go anywhere. He is ours, and he will stay with us. The Lord will guide him." But he wasn't so sure himself. He had seen the fire in his son's eyes, a fire that could burn all their foundations to the ground. The church, or rather the community's meeting house, stood 2 miles from the Fisher farm on the edge of a forest. It was a similarly simple limestone building, without a bell tower or a cross on the roof. Inside, bare whitewashed walls, benches of unplaned boards, and a pulpit for the preacher. No decorations, no icons, only the Word of God, which was the center of everything. This Sunday, the church was full. About 40 people had gathered, all members of their small community. Men in dark, simple suits, women in modest dresses and caps. The children sat quietly, accustomed to long services. Elijah sat next to Sarah, feeling the tension in the air. It was thicker than at home. The war was no longer an abstract concept, but a reality. Many families in the valley had already sent their sons to the Confederate Army. There were also those who sympathized with the Union, but their community had always stood apart. The preacher, Brother Jeremiah, an elderly man with a beard as white as snow and piercing blue eyes, stepped up to the pulpit. He placed a thick, worn Bible in front of him. "Brothers and sisters," he began, and his voice, quiet but distinct, filled the space. "Times of trial are upon us, times the Lord warned us about, times when brother will rise against brother and father against son. A storm of hatred rages around us, a storm born of pride, lust for power, and violence." He looked around at the congregation. His gaze rested on Isaac, who sat with a sullen, downcast face. "And we are tempted to join this storm. They tell us, 'Defend your home, defend your land, take up the sword, for all men do so.' But what does the Lord tell us? 'All they that take the sword shall perish with the sword.' And also, 'Love your enemies, bless them that curse you, do good to them that hate you, and pray for them which despitefully use you and persecute you.'" Elijah saw some of the men lower their heads. He knew what they felt. The same fear, the same uncertainty. The temptation was great. "We are a small community," Brother Jeremiah continued. "We are not strong in number, but our strength is not in the sword or in muscles. Our strength is in faith that moves mountains. We have chosen the path of peace, and now we must hold to this path more firmly than ever. We will not take up arms. We will not swear allegiance to any earthly government, for we have sworn it to the heavenly King. We will pray for all, for those in blue and those in gray, for they are all lost sheep and all need God's grace." The sermon was long and severe. Brother Jeremiah promised no easy paths. He spoke of persecution, mockery, possible hardships. He said they might be called traitors, cowards, enemies, but he called them to stand firm, as the first Christians had stood in the catacombs of Rome. After the service, the community did not disperse immediately. People gathered in small groups, talking quietly. Brother Amos, a neighbor whose farm bordered theirs, approached Elijah. He was younger than Elijah, but already graying and gaunt with care. "Elijah," he said, lowering his voice, "heard old Jacob Henderson got a letter last Friday. His son William fell at Manassas." Elijah closed his eyes. William Henderson. He remembered him as a boy, running through the cornfields with Isaac. "The kingdom of heaven be his," he whispered. "Yes," Amos nodded. "And yesterday, 2 men from the Vigilance Committee came to me, asked why my Elijah hadn't enlisted, said that in such times, every real man should be under arms, hinted that those who stay at home are unreliable." Elijah felt a chill in his stomach. Vigilance committees, these unofficial groups of Confederate patriots who kept order and monitored loyalty. Their attention was dangerous. "What did you tell them?" he asked. "What did I tell them?" "That we are peaceful people, that our faith forbids bloodshed." They laughed, said faith is a good thing, but now is the time for action, left displeased. Elijah put a hand on his neighbor's shoulder. "We must be steadfast, brother, and wise as serpents, and harmless as doves." "Easy to say, Elijah," Amos sighed. "You have a strong farm, much land. But me, if marauders come, from north or south, I don't know how to feed my family." They were silent. Amos's problem was not unique. Many in the community lived in poverty. The war had brought inflation. Prices for basic necessities, salt, kerosene, fabric, were skyrocketing. Peaceful labor on the land was becoming a less reliable source of sustenance. On the way home, Isaac was silent. He walked slightly ahead of the family, his shoulders tense. Elijah knew his son was weathering an internal storm. Brother Jeremiah's sermon, the news of William Henderson's death, the talks with neighbors, all were hitting the same spot. That evening, when the children had gone to their beds and Sarah was sewing by the fireplace, Elijah approached Isaac, who was cleaning harness in the corner of the room. "Son," he began cautiously, "I see you are struggling with yourself." Isaac didn't look up. "I don't understand, Father. We pray for peace, but peace does not come. People are dying, and we just stand aside and watch. Is that right? And what would you suggest?" Elijah asked calmly. I don't know, but feeling like a coward, it's not right." "A coward," said Elijah, "is one who renounces his principles out of fear. To stand by your convictions when everyone else does otherwise, that requires far greater courage than going with the crowd. Do you think I'm not afraid? I am. I'm afraid for you, for Mother, for your sisters. I'm afraid we might lose everything we have, but I am more afraid of losing my soul." Isaac finally looked at his father. There was pain and confusion in his eyes. "I will ask one thing of you," Elijah continued. "Do nothing in haste. Pray. Ask for guidance. And give us time. The war, it has only just begun. Perhaps it will end soon." But deep down, Elijah did not believe it. He felt the storm was only beginning. Autumn gave way to a cold, damp winter. The war, which many had predicted would end by Christmas, was only gaining momentum. News reached the valley in fragments, often distorted. There was talk of great battles somewhere in the east, of thousands dead. The echo of these battles reached them in the form of rising prices, empty shelves in shops, and increasingly wary, sometimes hostile, glances from neighbors. One day, in late January, when the ground was covered with crunchy snow and the sky was leaden with clouds, a rider approached the Fisher farm. It was not Mr. Jenkins. It was a militia captain, a lean, taut man in a worn gray uniform, with cold eyes and a revolver on his belt. He was followed by 2 soldiers, bundled in overcoats, with rifles on their backs. Elijah, who had come out to meet them, felt a chill run down his spine. He told Sarah and the children to stay inside. "Captain," Elijah nodded, "what can I do for you?" "Are you Elijah Fisher?" the captain asked, not dismounting. I am. I've been informed you have a son of conscription age, Isaac Fisher. I have a son, Isaac. He is 19. Precisely. And in our young Confederacy, Mr. Fisher, every man capable of bearing arms must serve. There is a draft. Your son is subject to it. Elijah slowly exhaled. He knew this day would come. Captain, we are Baptists. Our faith forbids us to take up arms. We are peaceful people. The captain smirked, but there was no hint of mirth in his eyes. Your faith is your personal business, Mr. Fisher, and the defense of the homeland is everyone's business. Where is your son? He is on the farm, but he will not go with you. He will go if I order it. The captain's voice became steely. Or do you want me to declare you both deserters? Under martial law, that's a hanging offense. At that moment, the door opened, and Isaac appeared on the threshold. He was pale but stood straight. I am here, Captain. Isaac Fisher. The captain pulled a folded sheet of paper from his jacket. By order of the government of the Confederate States of America, you are hereby drafted into the Army. You are to report to the assembly point in Winchester in 3 days. Isaac looked at his father. Elijah saw fear in his eyes, but also determination. He prayed silently that his son would find the strength. I cannot, Captain, Isaac said quietly but clearly. My faith does not allow me to kill. The captain spat into the snow. Your faith? Listen, boy, your peers are dying out there, dying for you, for your land, and you'll hide here, behind your mother's skirt and the Bible? It's a disgrace. It is no disgrace, Elijah interjected, his voice ringing. It is principle. We are willing to serve in other ways. We are willing to work, tend the wounded, share what we have, but we will not take up a rifle. The Army needs soldiers, not nurses, the captain cut him off. You have 3 days. If your son does not report, we will come for him, and the consequences will be severe, for your entire family. Understood? Without waiting for an answer, he turned his horse and rode off, followed by his soldiers. A deathly silence fell in the house. Hannah was crying quietly, clinging to her mother. Rebecca looked at her brother in horror. Aaron clenched his fists, his face burning with indignation. What will we do, father? Asked Sarah, her voice surprisingly calm. Elijah walked to the window, watching the retreating figures of the riders. We will pray, mother, and then we will hide Isaac. The decision did not come easily to him. Hiding was against his nature. He had always lived openly, honestly. But now it was a matter of survival, the survival of their faith. That same night, Isaac moved to the hayloft, burying himself deep in the hay. Aaron, whose childish sense of justice was outraged to the core, swore he would not betray his brother. 3 days passed in agonizing anticipation. Elijah barely slept. Every creak of a wagon, every bark of a dog made him flinch. He prayed tirelessly, asking God for protection, for the authorities to see reason, for peace. On the 4th day, the captain returned. With him were 6 soldiers. Where is your son, Fisher? He asked, not dismounting. He is not here, said Elijah, standing on the porch. Not here? The captain smirked. Well, we'll see about that. The soldiers dismounted and roughly pushed their way into the house. Elijah heard them overturning furniture, dropping things, shouting rudely at Sarah and the children. His heart bled. His home, his fortress, was being defiled. They searched the house, the barn, the henhouse. One soldier climbed into the hayloft and began prodding the hay with his bayonet. Elijah froze, his heart ready to leap out of his chest. He saw the bayonet point pass within inches of where he knew Isaac was lying. But, by lucky chance, or God's will, the soldier missed. Cursing, he climbed down. He's not here, Captain. The captain walked up to Elijah, his face twisted with anger. You're hiding him, Fisher. You're a traitor, and traitors have no place in Virginia. Mark my words, you'll regret this. He rode off, leaving behind a ransacked house and a deep sense of foreboding. When it grew dark, Isaac emerged from his hiding place. He was pale and trembling. Seeing the overturned chests, scattered utensils, and his mother's tear-streaked face, he clenched his fists. "I can't do this anymore, Father. I can't hide while my family suffers. I'd rather go." "No," Elijah said firmly. "You will not go. This is a test. The Lord has sent it to us, and we must endure it. We are not alone." He went out onto the porch and looked at the dark, starry sky. The valley lay in silence, but the silence was deceptive. It held a threat. For the first time, Elijah truly felt what it meant to be an outcast in his own country. But in his heart, above the fear, rose a strange, peaceful feeling. They had done the right thing. They had kept the faith. And that meant they were not alone. God was with them. The spring of 1862 came to the Shenandoah Valley with the smell of melting snow, damp earth, and the first snowdrops. But with spring came soldiers. First, Confederate troops under General Jackson, who waged his famous campaign in the valley. The soldiers were hungry, poorly clad, and bitter. They requisitioned everything they could: horses, livestock, fodder, food. One day, a wagon train with wounded arrived at the Fisher farm. An officer, his uniform dusty and stained with blood, demanded they quarter several men. "We have no room," Elijah tried to object. "Room will be found," the officer cut him off. "Or are you for the Unionists?" The threat hung in the air. Elijah nodded silently. They placed 5 wounded men in their house. Young men, almost boys, with bullet and shrapnel wounds. The air quickly filled with the smell of pus, blood, and sweat. Sarah, Rebecca, and even little Hannah, forgetting their fear, became nurses. They washed bandages, prepared food, fed the wounded broth, and cleaned their wounds. Elijah and Isaac, under the watch of an armed guard, dug graves for those who could not be saved. It was a hard time. To see the suffering, hear the moans, feel the helplessness. But it was also a time of grace. One of the wounded, a youth named Thomas from Georgia, before he died, took Sarah's hand and whispered, "Thank you, ma'am. You're like an angel." And there was no hatred in his eyes, only peace. When the wagon train left, taking the survivors, only bloodstains on the floor and the memory of others' suffering remained in the house. But something had changed in Isaac. He saw the war not in a romantic halo, but in its horrifying reality. He saw how boys, conscripted to defend their way of life, were dying, and his fervor died down, replaced by a deep adult sadness. "You were right, Father," he said to Elijah one evening. "This is not our war. Our war is with sin, and we can only fight it with prayer and love." Elijah silently embraced his son. He saw that Isaac had finally found his path, the path of a man, not a boy. But the trials continued. In the summer, when Union troops occupied the valley, the situation did not improve. To the Yankees, these Virginia farmers were rebels, accomplices of the enemy. Requisitions continued, now under the blue flag. One hot July day, as Elijah and Isaac worked in the orchard, a detachment of Federal cavalry rode up. It was commanded by a young lieutenant with a haughty face. "Who is the owner here?" he shouted. "I am." Elijah stepped forward. "We need your horses, and all your livestock. The Union Army needs provisions." Elijah felt the ground give way beneath him. The horses were essential for work. The cow provided milk for the children. The pigs, meat for the winter. "Lieutenant, we have a large family. We can barely make ends meet ourselves. Please, leave us at least something." "You live in a rebellious state," the lieutenant said coldly, "and you must bear responsibility. Everything is confiscated, and the grain from your barn, too." It was a death sentence. Without horses, they could not plow the fields. Without grain, they could not bake bread. Without livestock, they could not survive the winter. Isaac stepped forward, his face dark with anger. "You are robbing us. We never fought against you. We are peaceful people." The lieutenant looked at him mockingly. "Peaceful? Then why are you, a healthy lad, not in the army? Hiding, Like all these cowardly secessionists? We are Baptists, Isaac retorted hotly. We do not fight. A convenient faith, the lieutenant snorted. For cowards. Take everything, he commanded his soldiers. They led away the horses, drove off the livestock, and scooped out all the grain reserves from the barn. When the soldiers rode off, raising a cloud of dust, the Fisher farm lay in ruins. They stood in the middle of the yard, feeling robbed and humiliated. Little Hannah cried, looking at the empty pen where her favorite cow, Bessie, had stood that morning. Aaron stared after the soldiers with hatred. Rebecca silently hugged her mother. Sarah was pale, but her lips were pressed tightly together. Elijah felt despair rising in his throat. How would they survive? What would they feed the children? Winter was not far off. He sank to his knees right there in the dust and wept. They were tears of impotence, anger, and fear. "Father," Hannah whispered, frightened. But Sarah came to him and put a hand on his shoulder. "Elijah," she said quietly, "remember Job. The Lord gave, and the Lord hath taken away. Blessed be the name of the Lord." Her words were like a whip crack. Elijah raised his head. He saw his family, frightened but not broken. He saw the faith in Sarah's eyes, and his own faith, which had wavered, strengthened. He stood up, wiped his face. "You are right, Mother. The Lord will not forsake us. We will pray, and we will work." They prayed as a family, right there in the yard. They prayed not for the return of their property, but for their daily bread, for strength, for forgiveness for those who had robbed them. And a miracle happened. Not immediately, but the next day, Brother Amos came to them. He brought his second horse, old and feeble, but a horse nonetheless. "I have one left, Elijah. Take this one. She can still pull a plow." Other neighbors from the community followed. One had an extra measure of grain, another a piece of pork, another a few chickens. They shared the little they had, following the commandment, "Bear ye one another's burdens, and so fulfill the law of Christ." The Fisher farm was not restored overnight. A difficult year lay ahead, but they survived. They plowed the field with the old nag, planted potatoes and corn. They gathered wild berries and mushrooms in the forest. They fasted more often than they ate their fill, but they did not starve. Elijah saw God's hand in this. God did not send an angel to return their livestock. He sent them brothers and sisters in faith. He strengthened their spirit to endure the hardships. And in these hardships, they found something more valuable than property, a deep unity and the certainty that they were not alone. The year 1863 brought new trials. The war was becoming increasingly bitter. The Battle of Gettysburg echoed like thunder throughout the country. The Shenandoah Valley, which was the breadbasket for the Confederate Army, was visited again and again by both blue and gray detachments, squeezing the last juices from the land and its people. One late autumn day, when the first snow had already fallen, a rumor spread through the valley about deserters. A group of soldiers from the Confederate Army, unable to bear the horrors of war and deprivation, had abandoned their units and were hiding in the forests. They were caught and hanged without trial. In the evening, as the Fisher family sat by the fireplace, firewood was scarce, and they burned it sparingly. There was a knock at the door. It was weak, frightened. Elijah grew alert. Isaac picked up the pitchfork by the door. Elijah opened it. A young man, almost a boy, stood on the threshold. His clothes were torn and covered in mud, his face gaunt from hunger and fear. He was shivering from the cold. "Please," he whispered. "Help." Elijah understood instantly, a deserter. "Come in," he said quickly, stepping aside. The youth stumbled into the house and nearly fell. Sarah caught him, sat him in a chair by the fire. Rebecca brought him a mug of warm milk and a piece of bread. He ate greedily, his hands shaking. He was very young, 17 at most. "My name is Jesse," he finally spoke. "Jesse Colbert. From Tennessee. I couldn't take it anymore. They all died. All." He covered his face with his hands. Elijah looked at him with a heavy heart. Sheltering a deserter was deadly dangerous. If discovered, They could face the same fate, a noose on the nearest tree. "Father," Isaac said quietly, "we cannot turn him out." Elijah knew it. Christ had said, "I was a stranger, and you took me in." This youth was a stranger, and he was knocking at their door. "He will stay," said Elijah, "for the night. Then we'll decide." They hid Jesse in the hayloft, where Isaac had once hidden. The next day, Elijah sent Aaron to Brother Jeremiah for counsel. Brother Jeremiah came himself. After hearing the story, he was silent for a long time. "This is a test of faith, Elijah," he said at last. "We must help this youth, but we must be cautious. I know people who can smuggle him north, to his family, but it will take time." Jesse stayed with them for a week. During that time, he recovered somewhat. He told them about the war, not about parades and banners, but about the mud of trenches, blood, the death of friends. His stories were terrible and sobering. Sarah and Rebecca cared for him as they had once cared for the wounded. Aaron looked at him with admiration. He was a real soldier, but a soldier tired of war. Isaac found in him a kindred spirit, a man who was also forced to hide. But danger loomed over them again. Someone from the neighborhood, not from their community, noticed suspicious movement near their farm and reported it to the Vigilance Committee. One night, their house was surrounded by riders. This time, they were not regular soldiers, but local militiamen, the ones who called themselves patriots. They beat on the door with their rifle butts. "Open up, Fisher! We know you're hiding a deserter!" Elijah opened the door. A dozen armed men with grim faces stood before him. At their head was a man he didn't know with an armband. "Where is he?" the man barked. "There is no one in my house but my family," Elijah said calmly. "You lie! We'll find him!" They burst inside. The search began. Jesse was well hidden in a secret place under the floor of the hayloft, which Elijah and Isaac had built over the days. But Elijah's heart pounded wildly. If they found him... One of the militiamen, searching the house, approached Rebecca. She stood pressed against the wall, pale as a sheet. "And what do you know, girl?" he asked roughly. "Where is your coward brother hiding the traitor?" Rebecca was silent, her lips trembling. "Speak!" He grabbed her arm. At that moment, Isaac stepped forward. "Leave my sister alone." The militiaman released Rebecca and turned to Isaac. "Ah, so you're the righteous one who doesn't want to fight. Maybe you're the one hiding deserters." "I am hiding no one," Isaac said through clenched teeth. The house was crowded. Tension peaked. Elijah prayed silently. He saw one of the militiamen go up to the hayloft. He walked around, stomped, and suddenly his cry rang out. "Here! A trap door under the boards!" Elijah felt the ground disappear from under his feet. It was over. The militiamen dragged the terrified Jesse out of hiding. The leader, with a triumphant smile, approached Elijah. "Well, Fisher? The captain told you you'd regret it. For harboring a deserter, death. Take them all." The soldiers grabbed Elijah and Isaac. Sarah screamed. Hannah sobbed. And then something unexpected happened. Brother Amos, whom someone had warned, rode into the yard on his cart. With him were several other men from their community, including Brother Jeremiah. "Stop!" shouted Brother Jeremiah, his aged voice commanding. "What are you doing?" "Ah, the old man!" The leader turned to him. "Your righteous ones are caught, hiding traitors." "This youth is not a traitor," said Brother Jeremiah. "He is a lost sheep. He is tired of killing. Is that a crime?" "By the laws of war, yes," the man roared. "And all of you who shield him are traitors." "We are not shielding him," Brother Jeremiah said calmly. "We are trying to save his soul. And yours. Leave these people be. They have done no one any harm." "They have harmed the Confederacy!" The leader was beside himself. "And now they will be punished." He drew his revolver. The militiamen surrounded them, aiming their rifles. The situation was spiraling out of control. Elijah saw madness in these men's eyes. They were ready to kill. And at that moment, little Hannah, forgotten in the commotion, ran up to the leader and fell to her knees before him. "Don't kill my papa!" she cried through her tears. "Please! We'll give you everything we have. We will pray for you." Her childish voice, full of despair and faith, cut through the tense silence. The leader looked at her, and his ferocious expression wavered for a moment. He was a soldier. He had seen death, but the sight of a crying child begging for her father's life touched something in his hardened heart. He slowly lowered the revolver. "Hell," he whispered. "Take your deserter, and I don't want to see you here again. If he remains in the valley, we will find him and hang him. And you, we'll mark you as unreliable. But if you cross our path again—" He didn't finish, waved his hand. "Let's go." The militiamen, grumbling and cursing, released Elijah and Isaac, mounted their horses, and rode off, taking Jesse with them. Jesse looked back at them, his face distorted with fear. Elijah knew what awaited him, but he was powerless. When they were gone, silence fell in the yard. Hannah was still sobbing, clinging to her father. Elijah hugged her, feeling her small body tremble. "You were very brave, my girl," he whispered. "God sent you to be our guardian angel." Brother Jeremiah approached them. "We couldn't save him," he said bitterly. "We saved our soul, brother," Elijah replied. "We did what we had to do. The rest is God's will." They never learned what happened to Jesse, but that night left a deep scar on their hearts. They understood that the war was not just somewhere far away. It was here, on their doorstep, and it demanded sacrifices. Sometimes lives, sometimes faith. But they had preserved their faith. The last 2 years of the war merged for the Fisher family into one long, continuous nightmare. Hunger, cold, fear, the constant threat of being robbed or killed by one side or the other. They lived in hiding, like animals in their den. Their farm fell into disrepair. The fields were overgrown with weeds, as there was no strength or livestock to work them. They ate what they could grow in the garden, what they could find in the forest. Their clothes wore out, patched and repatched. They forgot the taste of sugar, salt, coffee. But in these incredible hardships, something amazing was happening to them. Their faith, which they had always professed, ceased to be just a set of dogmas. It became their breath, their food, their only support. Every evening, despite fatigue and hunger, they gathered together and read the Bible. They did not ask God for victory for one side or the other. They asked for peace. They asked for their daily bread. They asked for the strength to forgive those who wronged them. And God answered. Not with miracles, not with manna from heaven. He sent them help through other people, through their community, through random passers-by. One winter, when they had been without food for several days, an old Indian from a tribe living in the mountains knocked on their door. He silently placed a deer carcass on the threshold and left. Another time, a traveling Quaker, learning of their faith, left them a sack of flour. They learned to value the slightest acts of kindness. They found joy in the simple, that everyone was alive, that there was a roof over their heads, that the sun shone after a long night. Isaac became the true pillar of the family. His youthful fervor was replaced by a calm, confident strength. He was his father's hands and feet, the protector of his sisters. He learned to find food in the forest, set snares for game, and fish in the river. His eyes held the same deep faith as his father's, but a faith that had passed through the crucible of doubt and been forged into steadfast conviction. Rebecca blossomed despite the hardships. Her meekness and kindness became legendary in their area. She cared for sick neighbors, shared her last. Her prayers were quiet, but, it seemed to Elijah, the most powerful. Aaron, on the contrary, harbored anger. He saw injustice, saw suffering, and his childish faith could not accept it. He often argued with his father. "Why does God allow this? Why do the innocent suffer?" he asked. "God gives man free will, son," Elijah explained patiently, "and people choose evil. War is the work of human hands, and God helps us endure the consequences of that evil. He suffers with us." Aaron did not understand. His faith was fragile, and Elijah feared it might not survive. Hannah, their little Hannah, grew up in this hell, but by some miracle retained her childlike spontaneity and faith. She was their light in the darkness. Her prayers were simple and pure. Lord, send us food. Lord, let Papa not be tired. Lord, let the war end. And it was her faith that often supported the others. In April 1865, the news came. First in a whisper, then louder. General Lee had surrendered. The war was over. Elijah learned of it when Brother Amos galloped up on his old nag. He was shouting from the road, "It's over! Elijah, it's over!" They spilled out into the yard. Elijah, Sarah, Isaac, Rebecca, Aaron, Hannah. They stood and listened, not believing their ears. "Is it true?" Sarah whispered, and tears streamed down her face. For the first time in many years, they were tears of relief. "It's true," Brother Amos said, weeping and laughing at the same time. "He surrendered. In Virginia. The war is over." They hugged. Everyone cried. They cried from happiness, from grief for those who had not lived to see it, from exhaustion. The war was over, but what lay ahead for them? Peace brought new difficulties. The country lay in ruins. The Southern economy was destroyed. Their native Virginia was devastated. Reconstruction began, bringing new laws, new authorities, new uncertainty. The Fisher farm was in a pitiful state. There was no livestock, no seeds, no tools. There was no money to buy any of it. They were on the brink of starvation. One day, Elijah sat on the doorstep of his house, looking at the fields overgrown with weeds. He was ill. The years of hardship, stress, and age had taken their toll. He had heart problems and a bad cough. He knew he could not restore the farm alone. "Father," Isaac said, sitting down beside him, "I will go north." Elijah looked at him in surprise. "Why?" "There is work there. In factories, on construction sites. They pay money. I will save up and send for you. For livestock, for seeds. Otherwise, we will not survive." Elijah wanted to object, but he couldn't. His son was right. It was their only chance. "Are you sure?" "Yes, I must do this. For the family." A week later, Isaac left. A part of their soul went with him, but they believed it was necessary. Life without Isaac was even harder. Elijah, with Aaron's help and that of neighbors, tried somehow to manage the household. But his strength was failing. His illness was progressing. And again, God sent them help. Unexpectedly. One day, a man in an expensive suit, by the standards of the time, was passing by on the road. He stopped at their farm, dismounted, and approached Elijah, who was working in the vegetable garden. "Mr. Fisher?" he asked. "I am." Elijah straightened up, suppressing a cough with difficulty. "My name is Robert Lawrence. I am from Philadelphia. A young man told me about you. Isaac Fisher." "Isaac!" Sarah exclaimed, running out of the house. "Is he alive? Is he well?" "Alive and well, ma'am," Mr. Lawrence smiled. "And working very hard. He saved my son's life on a construction site when he almost fell from the scaffolding. He is a modest fellow, didn't want to say anything about himself for a long time, but we found out a few things. He told us about you, about your faith, about your hardships." Mr. Lawrence turned out to be a Quaker. Like them, the Quakers were pacifists and helped all those affected by the war, regardless of side. "We have established an aid fund," he explained, "for people like you, for those who kept faith in humanity despite everything. Please allow us to help you." And help came. A few weeks later, they received from Mr. Lawrence 2 strong horses, a cow, pigs, chickens, seeds, and tools. It was a miracle woven from the kindness of a stranger and the courage of their son. With this gift came a letter from Isaac. He wrote that he was well, that he would send money soon and might return home. He wrote that he was proud of his family and that their faith inspired everyone around him. Elijah, reading the letter, wept. He wept from gratitude. God had not forsaken them. He had walked with them through hell and led them into the light. Not immediately, not without losses, but he had led them out. Several more years passed. The Fisher farm slowly came back to life. Isaac returned home, matured, confident. He married Brother Amos's daughter, and they built their own house nearby. Rebecca married a young preacher from their community, and moved to a neighboring state to carry the word of God to others. Aaron. Aaron never found peace. The anger sown in him by the war did not subside. One day he announced he was leaving for the West, to the free lands. He said he could no longer live where everything reminded him of suffering. Elijah and Sarah blessed him, but their hearts ached. They prayed for him every day. Hannah grew up and became a beautiful, kind young woman. She stayed with her parents, caring for them. Elijah was aging. His health was broken, but his spirit was strong. Often in the evenings, he sat on the porch, looking at his valley, a valley slowly healing its wounds. The fields were green, apples ripened in the orchards, children laughed in Isaac's yard. He remembered all they had been through: hunger, fear, humiliation, the loss of friends, the constant threat of death. But he remembered other things too: prayers in a cold house, a helping hand in the most desperate moment, tears of gratitude, Sarah's face illuminated by faith, Hannah's childish voice pleading for mercy, Isaac's courage, Rebekah's kindness. They had been through all of it, and they had endured, not because they were strong, but because they believed. Believed that God was with them, and that faith was stronger than war, stronger than hunger, stronger than death. One summer evening, as the sun set behind the mountains, painting the valley in gold and purple, Elijah sat in his usual spot. Sarah was next to him. They held hands in silence. "Remember, Mother," Elijah said quietly, "how we were afraid we would lose everything?" "I remember," Sarah smiled. "But we did not lose, we gained." "What did we gain?" "We gained certainty. Certainty that nothing can separate us from the love of God. Neither hunger, nor danger, nor the sword." Elijah nodded. She was right. They had walked through the valley of the shadow of death, but they had feared no evil, for he was with them. He looked at the sunset, at the peaceful, beautiful valley, at his home, and he felt a deep, all-encompassing peace. A peace which passeth all understanding, a peace granted to them by him who was their shepherd. And in that peace was their victory.